תודה רבה לברוך, ליוסי ולגיא על ההרצאה המעניינת ובהצלחה רבה במיזם. אני אתחיל בעברית ואמשיך באנגלית. It's a great honor, first of all, to invite הדורם שיריחי, הדורם שיריחי. את הדורם אני מכיר מאז שאני ילד, וכל צפר בישראל מכיר את הדורם. הדורם מההתחלה שלו בישראל הפך להיות אחד ממובילי הצפרות והאורניתולוגיה בעולם, קבע סטנדרטים מקצועיים מאוד 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 גבוהים לאיך מתעסקים בצפרות ואיך מתעסקים במחקר, ושמחה גדולה לראות את הדורם פה. הדורם, בוא בבקשה, תציג את לארס.
האמת שאני מאוד מתרגש,
מיקרופון.
אז דבר ראשון אני אגיד... אוקיי. אז חברים, חברות, צפרים יקרים, אני מאוד מתרגש להיות פה. את האמת היא, אני גם לא כל כך עדיין קלטתי שאני פה, שיוסי ודן הצליחו להביא אותי מהצד השני של כדור הארץ, מאיי פיג'י וטונגה. ובאתי לפה לחגוג את ההוצאה לאור של הספר שכתבתי יחד עם לארס סוונסון, שותף שלי לטווח של יותר מ-20 שנה. על הספר עצמו עבדנו 18 שנה. העבודה על הספר הייתה מאוד אינטנס, הייתה מאוד כללה עבודה גם עם צוות של מומחים מכל העולם, 800 צלמים, והספר, כמו שאתם ראיתם פה בתצוגה, זה מעין אנציקלופדיה חדשה לציפורי אירופה, מזרח התיכון וצפון אפריקה, ולמעשה הספר הזה מסכם את עבודת חיינו ועשורים של התקדמות בתחום הצפרות וצילום. לפני שאני אציג את לארס, אני רוצה להודות ליוסי לשם ולדן אלון על ההחלטה לעשות את ההשקה של הספר פה, וכמובן להזמין את לארס ואת אשתו לנה לסיור בכל הארץ, או לפחות חצי מהארץ, שזה היה ממש סיור מאלף. והשיא של הביקור הזה, של לארס סוונסון, דרך אגב, זה הביקור השמיני שלו פה בארץ, הוא מאוד אוהב את הארץ וציפורי הארץ. זאת תהיה ההרצאה שלו בעוד כמה דקות. החלטנו, דן, יוסי ואנוכי, לקיים את השקת האנציקלופדיה דווקא כאן בישראל, משום שחלק גדול מהנושאים של שונות וזיהוי שכלולים בספר הם תוצאה של עבודה וניסיון שנרכשו כאן בישראל. לא בניו זילנד ולא בדרום אמריקה. כן? במילים אחרות, אני חייב הרבה תודות לחברה להגנת הטבע. מאז חוג הצפרות הירושלמי בשנות ה-70, שאני הייתי אחד מהחניכים הראשונים של יוסי לשם, ועד למרכז הצפרות הישראלי היום. ולהרבה מאוד אנשים וחברים קרובים במהלך השנים, ואני רוצה להזכיר רק חלק קטן מהם. יוסי, מנחם, אהוד, אודי, רמי, עוז, ירון, אמיר, דן, יונתן, נועם ויואב, ורק הזכרתי חלק קטן מהם. וכמובן למשפחתי היקרה, ובמיוחד לבן אדם שאני הכי אוהב בעולם, אחותי ארגה, ולבעל של הדודי שנמצאים פה. סליחה שאני מתרגש, אוקיי? אז כמו שכן, אמרתי לכם, הביאו אותי, רק לפני כמה ימים נחתתי פה. אז אם תשאלו אותי, מה המניע לכתיבת האנציקלופדיה הזאת? אז אני אגיד לכם. לארס ואני ניסינו לייצר את כלי ההבחנה המקצועי ביותר לצפר השדה. אני חושב שהצלחנו, אבל כשאני מסתכל פה בקהל, אני רואה הרבה מאוד צפרים ישראלים צעירים, ואני מאמין שאתם תהיו מסוגלים ליותר. היה לי גם המזל לקבל את עידודו של לארס סוונסון, מאז ימי הצפרות המוקדמים בשנות ה-80, ובמיוחד בתקופת עבודתי באילת. תקופה שיצרה את הידידות שלנו והזיווג המושלם לכתיבת הספר. כך שהסיבה העיקרית למסע שלי מהאוקיינוס השקט ועד לכאן היא על מנת להודות לכל כך הרבה מכם. ועכשיו יש לי את העונג להציג את לארס סוונסון. למעשה, כולכם ורבים בישראל כבר השתמשתם ומשתמשים בספרים של לארס. במיוחד אני רוצה לציין את המגדיר לזיהוי ביד למטבעים, The Ringing Guide, וה-Collins Guide, שזה המדריך השדה, למעשה שמשתמשים בו הכי הרבה בכל אירופה, מזרח התיכון וצפון אפריקה, וגם פה בישראל, הוא תורגם גם בעברית. לארס היה גם העורך של העיתון האורניתולוגי השוודי במשך שנים רבות, והוא הקים את ועדת הנדירים בשוודיה, והיה גם במשך שנים בוועדה הטקסונומית של האגודה האורניתולוגים באנגליה. וכן, אני רק מיניתי כמה דברים כמובן, על קצה המזלג מה האיש הזה עשה ותרם לצפרות הבינלאומית. אז כך שאין אדם יותר מתאים לספר לנו על 60 שנות צפרות, שינויים וכללים חדשים, אבל עדיין אותה הרפתקה. אני ממש מתרגש להזמין פה את לארס סוונסון על הבמה. בבקשה.
Thank you very much. Well, I think Hadram has said it all, so I can just show some pictures perhaps. No, I want to warmly thank the hosts for inviting my wife and me. It's been some delightful dates in Israel. There are always good birding here, so I enjoy coming back here. I meant to give a few flashbacks, how could I write a Ringer's Guide and Field Guide and now a big handbook with Hadorem? So you have to permit me to give some flashbacks of my life. I've been birding for over 60 years, and I'll try to give you some impressions of that. So here I am, 14 years old, and with my first pair of binoculars. It's spring in Sweden, wood anemones in April probably, and I'm a bird watcher. And my whole family was nature lovers, so my parents took us, me and my sisters, out in the field in the weekends. So it was sort of relaxing and easygoing, but I soon started to be methodical. Everything I did with birding was, when I look back in my diaries, which I started to write when I was, well, from the beginning, from the first day actually. So I have about 25 or 30 such diaries, and it's fun to look back in them and see how I made notes of everything new I saw. Here's a bitten show with a marsh harrier attacking, and I also started to describe all vocalizations I heard. And you see up here in the corner there's a little symbol. It's to make it easier to find my description of a new call. So very early, apparently, when I look back, I had an idea to reuse everything in books or papers. I also became interested in variation in birds. So here, Montague Harrier males, how I could separate in a big reed bed where several pairs bred, that the males could absolutely be separated in the field. So it was a detective work. It was fun to be out. Birding is birds fly and they are beautiful and they sing. So it's easy to love birds, but also you have both sides in you. You're interested in the beauty of it, but also I was methodical. So how did I learn in the beginning? We were lucky in Sweden. We had a very good field guide to the birds of Sweden, written by this guy, Erik Rosenberg. This was published 1953, and when my father noticed that I had become interested in birds, he just picked it out. He was a book publisher, so he picked it out of the shelf and said, "Here you are. Now you can learn more quickly." This guy wrote. It was way ahead of its time. This guy had seen everything himself, and that's very valuable, that you're out in the nature all the time and make notes. And for instance, it was a primitive. I mean, in '53 there were not so many color plates in the book. There were some. I'll show one just after this. But there were black and white drawings, but long text and very good description of the vocalizations. And for instance, he described this call. Maybe it's yeah. Few people knew what this call was. Some people thought it was. I had friends later from Denmark or Holland. Is that bar-tailed godwit migrating in the night? Because it was dark. It was in the night. You heard this call. No, it was the mating call of single male coots. And Rosenberg knew it. He describes it very well in the text. There were some color plates. They were rather good. There were the shoveler, the long-billed duck, atop there. It also describes how you can separate the call of a female shoveler from a mallard female. And I. Sorry, I don't hear anything. Yeah, it's a little bit more gruffy and deep than the mallard. And Rosenberg described all this. I made this recording in hula, actually. Okay, but in the field guides were primitive. Apart from this Rosenberg book, field guides I used were primitive. I mean, look at the silhouettes of raptors. Not easy to separate birds with such primitive sketches. This was a book from '34 that was very popular in Sweden, and the color plates were even worse because it would take a lifetime before you saw a little grebe walking. I mean, this is not very useful, you have to agree. But that was the books we had early on. Only then in '54 came the American guide. Roger Torrey Peterson wrote this very good book, which remained the main field guide for over 20 years. It came in Swedish the year after '55. So the plates were really good. He simplified, and that has been a standard since, because it's the best pedagogic way to teach people what to look for, to have them in the same position and perhaps have pointers on what is important. Okay, but you don't learn everything from books. The best way is if you have a knowledgeable friend who is more experienced or a little bit older, and in my case it was Håkan Delin, which I will give credit now to. We became close friends, and we were touring Sweden all the time for many, many years, for decades. And he was so good. He knew all calls, and he was also a very good artist. He did the owl plates in the British handbook, the BWP as it is called. In 1985 these were made. So that was helpful for me when I sort of developed my skills as a birder. In those days there were no identification papers in bird journals, but the first I knew of is one by a Swedish professor at the Lund University, Gustav Rudebeck, and he wrote in 1945 a modern identification paper on how to separate the buzzards, which was based on his field craft, not on museum material. I wanted to become at first a bird photographer, and these I took when I was 17 years old with a simple, a little reflex camera, a Dixa. It's a short-eared owl and red-breasted flycatcher breeding in the southeast of Sweden. Actually, all these nests, because it was nest photography, which wasn't forbidden or thought as a bad thing in those days. It was absolutely normal. All these nests, I got a tip about where to find them by Victor Hasselblad, the man behind the camera. I met him in the field, and he thought it was nice, a young guy who wanted to become a bird photographer. That was the camera, and I had some help from my mother to do a little hide camouflage painted, and there I was. But after a while I found it took a long time, and you just looked at one bird for hours, while my friends who later came and fetched me from the hide told me about, they'd seen so many good birds. So I thought maybe bird photography is not for me. In those days, equipment we had these wooden tripods and straight telescopes of the German brand. Very good optics, but the light was poor in them. Hensoldt, they were called. Everybody had them. And this is from Ottenby Bird Observatory at Öland, southeast Sweden, where I spent a lot of time. And a Swedish birder could look like this in the 50s. I would say fully equipped. Even Lepidoptera he could study. But I got caught by a bug. In '63, I had been in the 50s at Falsterbo Bird Observatory to help to ring birds, but then for 62, 63, somewhere, I started to be a ringer at Ottenby Bird Observatory, and I loved handling birds, to hold a greenish warbler like that in the hand and study feathers and colors and molt. So I got really fascinated by that. For instance, you could get a two-barred crossbill in the autumn there, and it was fantastic time. And I went there. I was a ringer. I was even for a short time the warden of the Bird Observatory in the 60s. And this is a view of the Bird Observatory in those days. Now it's a modern complex with a laboratory, and you couldn't recognize it. But you can see they had no less than 4 Helgoland traps, these big, like fish traps, That's how you catch the birds, and that's one, and you see and even there is one. And nowadays they just have 2, and that's where the birds end up. I also went to another Swedish bird observatory, which was a little bit oddly enough placed on Capri in Italy. Axel Munthe, the doctor who wrote the famous book about the story of San Michele, he owned the whole slope where the red arrow points. And on top of that hill, there was a ruin. Allegedly, it was used by the pirate Barbarossa. Anyway, it was now owned by a Swedish well-situated doctor, and he allowed the Bird Society of Sweden to organize a bird observatory there. And it was a bit scary for me, I suffer from vertigo. I don't like it, and it's 150 meters, absolutely dead straight down. And many of the nets were on the edge. And the birds came from below and flew and got caught on the outside. I had to go between the edge and the nets to pick them out. And the first days were a bit shaky, but I managed to get over it. And the price for getting over my vertigo was to be able to handle beautiful birds, which I was not used to. In those days, when you identified birds and aged them and sexed them, it was the English, a British or English Ringer's Guide by Cornwallis and Smith. I was not so impressed by that book. I thought the drawings were rather rude and not very lifelike, and the text was very cautious, and they said, you can't age in the autumn, you can't age song thrush or redwing because they're too variable. And if you went back to the German leaflet from 1951, there it was described how to age these thrushes. And Rudolf Drost, the German, he was a pioneer. He wrote the first good, reliable aging book. He was a little bit of an inspiration for me. But anyway, I started to make my own drawings of wing. This is a marsh warbler, and every bird I caught, I tried to document for a better Ringer's Guide. And I did a little prototype in Swedish, it's a really small one. In '63 I started, this is handwritten, and I made this, all this is just handmade. So it wasn't, it just circulated for a year among, I had it and some of the ringers at Ottenby used it, but to improve it. And then finally, '64, it was printed, still in Swedish, still very brief text, but still, that was the first. And as you see, I explain what to look for among the greater coverts and the tail shape when you age a song thrush. To write a Ringer's Guide, you need to go to museums and study skins. You can't just, it would take you 40, 50 years to get all the knowledge you can get quickly in a museum when you are studying molt and feather clothes. We don't have these winters anymore. We used to have them when I was younger, and I took skis after dinner and went to the museum to work the night and went home in the dark. By midnight, here, Tony Owls were singing, beautiful. In a museum, they have about 120,000 skins in Stockholm, and they are all stacked like that in drawers. And what is a skin? Aren't there any feathers? Of course. The feathers grow in the skin, and they're just called by taxidermists skin. And they are actually, like the lower bird here, lying down very comfortably with cotton wool inside and the legs and the head with bill preserved. Whereas this is called a mount, and they take a lot of space. And they are not all, and they collect dust. Anyway, you don't need much to study in a museum. I had my ruler with a zero stop for measuring the wing and putting the wing bend there, and a pointed edge to measure the tail. I prefer simple running calipers, not laboratory ones. And you can have a little watchmaker's eyepiece if you want to. In those days, early days, I this was before I was computerized, so I made notes in such books. And I expanded my studies to go to sort of the Mecca for anyone interested in birds. Tring British Museum has north of London, in the small pretty town called Tring, a huge collection. They have 670,000 birds. They have practically everything. I think they miss 4 species of the 10,800 or whatever. So I came there. This is newly built, as you can see. In the late 60s, early 70s, it was ready. And all the skins from London, South Kensington was moved up here. Just show you this, so you don't go there by inspiration. You need appointment first. By appointment only. They're very strict about securities. There have been some thefts, so you have to just follow their instructions. But once you're in there, it's 3 stories of 11 rows of cupboards full of birds. And you open one of these, and all these you see here on the left are eye-browed thrushes. So there are about 300 specimens of just this Siberian thrush species. To give you an example of how well sorted this museum is. Not only the skins make excellent conditions for a visitor, researcher, also the library must be mentioned. They have almost every ornithological journal, often from the first volume. And they keep getting them, and they bind them, and it's fabulous. You can check everything when you're there. They also have a historical library that Walter Rothschild brought together. He was a collector, so they have practically every old illustrated bird book there. So it was a lot of work, and a lot of these notebooks filled with data, which I later had to put into Excel tables or whatever and scan to preserve them better. But luckily, after some years, I got small computers, and this is how I work in New York, and looking out over Central Park, studying southeastern dippers from Europe for the handbook. Anyway, in those days, early days, I was still doing a ringer's guide, and this was finally ready 1970. I'm very privileged as an author of a ringer's guide to have been alone on the market for over 40 years. Now there is a it's a small type, but it's a French guide translated also into English, which covers non-passerines as well. But for 43 years, there was just this book I produced. Even the British Trust for Ornithology started to sell my book instead of their own. So apparently it was welcome, and I'm very delighted for that. I might do a 5th edition if I have the power. I have the plan. Well, this ringer's guide was even translated Finnish, Hungarian, Catalan, and Chinese. And the Chinese wanted it because they use it as a basic training book because in China it's a lot of activities now in Beidahe and in many places, and on Taiwan as well. So the introductory chapters in my ringer's guide are used by them. But then, strangely enough, in 2011, a Japanese edition came out, which is the most beautiful because they have this Siberian ruby thread on the cover. And the translator, a charming man, he asked me so many questions about the content when he translated it that I said to him, if you're not ready soon, I will not see it published. How old are you? He asked. Well, I'm over 73 or something when I asked him. No, 70 perhaps. So, oh, I'm 82, he said. Okay, so that was the Ringer's Guide. Now, many things happened. In the 60s, for instance, in bird watching in Sweden, we suddenly discovered with better equipment that if you put on good clothes and went out into a storm, seabirds blown from the Atlantic or above Denmark and came into Swedish waters. So we saw a lot of birds. It was a bit chilly, but it was exciting. I'm lucky enough to live like this. So I live 40 meters from the sea, and I can have my telescope like that. I can warm my coffee, and I have seen all these birds from this veranda. And great shearwater, sooty, black-browed albatross, manx, pomerin. I've had 42 little auks passing my veranda in one day. That was seabirds, one thing. But I also got interested in taking sound recordings. But I told you, bird photography took too long time or whatever. I felt something else could be useful. So I started to do recordings. And I have first used the Sony, the Walkman stuff. But now I'm in Olympus. There are other brands. But to have a memory stick or a memory card is better. The moving parts in that DAT cassettes or in ordinary analog cassettes or even in mini discs, if you're in the desert, as I often was, you get sand in them. They're not working in the long run. So better to have the new equipment. The microphone with a flexible plastic parabola is a Swedish thing, Telinga Pro. I think it's the best on the market if you don't want a very heavy thing, but this can be rolled like a big cigar in your luggage. Okay. So I did first a little analog cassette of Soviet birds in the 84. Very primitively edited by myself. But it was a first attempt. And then the ABBA musician Benny Andersson asked me, can't you do a CD with bird song for me? Oh, yeah, why not? Benny was interested in birds. He's not an expert at all, but he's a musician. So I think he's inspired by bird sounds. So yes, I did that. And that has sold, it's a gold record for that. First it was with both CD and analog, but now analogs are out, so now they just sell it with that one. But another thing I did with my sounds was this book about bird song, where you can read about and see pictures of the bird, but then you can also press the button there. You can take the correct number there, which you get on the page, where this thrush nightingale, for instance. You press that button, and you get to hear, I think thrush nightingale song. That was 150 of my recordings, and it's out in many languages. And finally, in the bird app, the Collins Bird Guide, which you have in Hebrew as well, but you haven't got the app. It's not been translated of the publisher. The publisher must want to translate it and put it into an app, and then it can be done. But it exists in English and German and French, so it is available. And you go into the app, and you indicate on one of these. Sorry, we take that later. If you okay, here you get to hear the calls that way. So they are in your mobile phone, which is kind of useful. Okay. At this time, I had realized that I only were focused on identification, and then I saw this cartoon in the New Yorker. Maybe it doesn't want to be identified, the guy says to the other. Yeah, that was a possibility, but it didn't stop me from wanting to do my own field guide. So in the 60s, when we had all these field guides, that is sort of a chronological order at the times, I did some plates for a field guide on my own, and I sent them in the 66 to a publisher, but it was turned down just as well. I came instead, long later, I arranged a meeting in Falsterbo, 1982, and some good guys, like in the middle here, Peter Grant, Kilian Melani, and myself, the three of us started to talk about making a new field guide. And I could see that Kilian was very talented. He sketched all the time. And in 84, we signed contracts for the bird guide. The publisher is bottom left in blue hat. And we went around to study birds. We needed the artist needed to see everything, of course. And Dan Zetterström, very talented Swedish artist, joined the team in 91 to speed up things, because bird books sometimes takes many years to do. Finally, it was ready in 99, and it has, as you know, been published in many languages, 21 actually, and combined it has sold 1.2 million copies so far. So maybe a good time to look back and enjoy life. Not so. Because I had met this guy in 1984 at the Eilat ringing station. And this Eilat ringing station was a center of interest. Many Western European birdwatchers came here to see new birds, to learn more. And Hadorham was, of course, in the core of this activity and took the initiative of it. And he was everywhere and arranging trips, etc. And even taught school children to appreciate birds, which was very good. 2 years later, in 86, Hadorham, I think, also behind the initiative. There were more people, of course, involved, but to have an identification meeting in Eilat in November. And when this photo was taken, I think a very rare bird came on the left side here. Only one guy there probably had seen it already. So this became the friendship, Hadorham and me, with the Barbary Falcon, and he tried to come up with projects that we could do together, but not until about 2000 I said yes, because then the field guide, Collins' book, was ready. So I thought, well, I'm free now. Why not do a handbook? It can take 3 or 4 years. It covers, as you know, all these. It's a slightly larger area than Western Palearctic, usually the whole Arabian Peninsula and the whole of Iran, for instance. And there are breeding newly made range maps, and for instance, for coal tit, there are many subspecies, and you need to be careful how. And on the maps we even show the borders between the subspecies, and that you can only study in a museum. That's the only place where you can put them together and compare them. So we had to go a lot to museums once we decided to take a critical look on all the subspecies published. And we require 75% should be different, otherwise we lump them as a synonym. Well, anyway, here you are, all these field work also to write the handbook. In Kazakhstan, night and day, always working with a little one-man tent, my little home for all these years. We ended up with 15% less subspecies. I just compare here IUC, Howard and Moore, Handbook of Birds of the World. They all have above 1,000. But because we had our rules and our strict outline of the book, so it ended up like that. And I show all these just to give you the feeling of how much we had to work to write the book. For instance, on vocalization, we describe for the first time in the handbook the correct song of red-throated thrush, and I can just very briefly let you hear it. It's very simple. It's like a field fair. I've recorded in Mongolia, in Altai. Okay. This is red, and so it's some original material in the book, and this is why I had to carry all this equipment wherever I went. Hadorram came up with a concept that we should, when there were difficult species like pied wheat deer, eastern black-eared, western black-eared, they are very similar, as you can see, that we in the handbook would make combined such comparisons with a lengthy caption to explain differences. And in the aging and sexing section, we describe such things. So you get all the information from my Ringer's Guide. You get also in our text, and even more, because it's more modern and more full. Biometrics, I said a little bit thoughtlessly that we couldn't copy numbers from other handbooks. We must do our own work. So we went to museums, and that was, of course, crazy in a way. Only this crested lark subspecies took 600 measurements to write this. And actually, we took, largely but Hadorram helped 700,000 measurements. And you really should perhaps test your head when you think back, why did I do all that? Authors typically spend 1 to 3 months a year in museums to write this book. And we visited all these big museums, including Tel Aviv. Hadorram did that. I have to finish with reminding you that photographs is what makes this handbook unique. It was all the time thought to be a photographically illustrated handbook, and it became the most illustrated book on any animal group that has ever been published. Did 5,000 in. Hadorram devised elaborate systems to store all these pictures that were, 90,000 were considered, and 5,000 in the 2 volumes. Nowadays, of course, you just go Birds of Israel, and you want to see long-billed pipit, and you get all these. It is easier these days than it was before when they were on film. And then Hadorram drafted a layout and captions, which I later tried to trim down to shorter length. And we had 2 independent teams that checked everything we did, because we wanted it to be as reliable as possible. And it's human to make mistakes, but if more experts were involved, it would become better. So sometimes we had to go back, Hadorram and me together here in New York, to check something that was discussed. And Hadorram even went to Cyprus to take autumn plumages of Cyprus wheat ears. So finally, they are ready. And I'll just quickly skim through, if you haven't had time yet, but you can look at the real thing, so I don't need to do this much, but this is what it looks like. Long ago, I collected photographs. I cut up journals to put in photographs. And now, of course, like this. And now you just go to internet and you get immediately Naumann's thrush in Sweden, or here, records in the autumn of yellow-browed warbler. And now you have this, of course. All countries almost have this, that you immediately get information. And how has equipment developed? My old Prominar from Kova, this is I always use, and even now I use a Canon stabilized. And the cameras have become extremely advanced, like laboratories to take pictures, Hadorami at sea. So even if it looked like this when I started, and now maybe it looks like this, it's the same adventure for me to be a bird watcher, because it's like hunting without killing. You never know what you will get. It's so nice to be out in the free. Thank you very much.